Good afternoon. This is Debra V. Wilson. I'm in Bradford. It is Thursday, the 17th of February, 2022, and the time is 1900 hours and 12 minutes. In my research, I spent a fair bit of time trying to understand the narratives that people internalize that facilitate the performance of identity. I know that's a mouthful, and this is a very quick video. And in that light, if you define yourself as straight, what narratives give life to that? If you define yourself as being part of the LGBT plus community, if you define yourself as black, brown, white, Asian, whatever, what narratives do you utilize to give life to performance of that identity? I live in Bradford, and the area I live in has a high percentage of young people, and it seems like a high percentage of young men. I don't live in a wealthy community. I live in probably a working class community, and there are lots of young men about in their 20s, and they can be frightening in appearance. So in what I specifically look at is the narratives that create the performance of an identity that is weaponized and facilitates the performance of an identity to hurt other people. But then the antithesis to that is that the performance of identity in which you seek to harm no one, and indeed you're helpful. In that light, I was walking back home from my volunteer job, and I always try to get in some exercise. So I was walking uphill. Now that can be anywhere in Bradford. It's the hilliest city I've ever lived in. And I saw three young men talking. Okay, and they they were scary. They were white. I'm black. And what was even more frightening, there was this big muscular dog, and the dog had a lead, but the whoever the dog belonged to wasn't holding it. So I kept thinking, well, across the street, I'll do something to avoid the dog, but the dog just looked really frightening. So I stopped, and these three young men who looked really scary, one of them turned around and asked me, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "Yes." So he grabbed a hold of the dog's lead and then had the dog sit at his feet and was holding on to the lead and the dog's collar, and the dog was sitting at his feet. So then as I walked past, I was thanking the man that was holding on to the dog, but he was talking to the other one of the other two men, and then the third man kept saying to me, "He doesn't bite, he doesn't bite, he doesn't bite." And that encounter that took a matter of minutes, probably even just seconds, I thought to myself, these young males that I'm pretty sure that anyone that saw them would think they were pretty scary looking, because the area I was walking through has some pretty scary looking young men. But he recognized that I was afraid, and he didn't want to exploit that fear. And as a matter of fact, he took responsibility for making me less fearful. So while my focus is understanding what narratives give life to identities that are weaponized, the antithesis is what made that boy, whose back was to me, by the way, and I stopped because I thought, well, I need to cross the street. This dog is really scary and he's not on the leash. The boy turned around and asked, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "Yes." And he then took it upon himself to resolve the reason why I was afraid. And then the other boy kept reassuring me as I continued up the hill and walked past these three young men. "He doesn't bite, he doesn't bite, he doesn't bite." So although they looked a bit rough around the edges, and you probably would, if it were darker and deserted, I probably would have crossed to the other side of the street. But because I didn't, and I'm in a similar circumstance, if it were at night, again, I'd cross on the other side of the street. But then nevertheless, I remember thinking as I was walking past, and I kept trying to thank the boy and tell him it was such a nice thing he had done, which it was. Of course, the dog should have been on a lead. I know that. But it was still nice that he responded to my fear and did the right thing, that he recognized his responsibility to not do harm. And if he could prevent it, then he would prevent any potential harm or even discomfort. This is Debra V. Wilson. I'm in Bradford. And I look at the constructed narratives as they are the foundation of the performance of identity. Thank you.